Joining me is O.H. Skinner. O.H. Skinner is the Alliance for Consumers Executive Director, and an interesting story that I've been promoting all morning long that he's going to talk about, allianceforconsumers.org, allianceforconsumers.org, and we welcome O.H. Skinner. Good morning, sir.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. Talk to me a little bit. I never heard of Alliance for Consumers before, but an interesting story. So tell me a little bit about what your mission statement is for Alliance for Consumers. I mean, it's probably what it says, but maybe more specifically.
Yeah. So look, Alliance for Consumers is a group that tries to make consumer protection about consumers and not about government bureaucrats, left-wing trial lawyers, or any of those people. You know, for a really long time, when it was, your listeners know this, when you go to consumer protection, you think about consumer protection, you got some, Josh Shapiro or some Pennsylvania guys announcing a big settlement against a company, and then you realize that you don't get a check. If you do get a check, it's for 10 cents. But you do know that a bunch of left-wing trial lawyers are getting a bunch of money off of it. And at the end of the day, consumer protection has not been about consumers for a really long time. So we spent a lot of time talking about that. Spent a lot of time talking about all the efforts out of D.C. under Joe Biden that were trying to wipe away your gas stove and all the things in your house that you actually cared about, because consumers just want they want to be able to buy the things that work for their family, and they'd like it that when some company gets held accountable that they actually get a check.
Yeah, so the Alliance for Consumers is pro-consumer, whereas all these consumer or government bureaucracies that say they protect the consumer really line the pockets of the lawyers and just go after corporations, and the consumer ends up being hosed anyway. They don't, like you said, they lose stoves and appliances, and costs are driven up because of settlements, but the consumer doesn't see any money. They don't see necessarily any benefit. It just seems like one big racket. So allianceforconsumers.org. So this interesting story, and I'll let you, I've just been teasing it, saying that you're exposing how top trial law firms, as you call them here, the Shady Eight, exploiting state contracts and then funneling money to Democratic campaigns. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, look, so I mean, one of the key things that you hear from people is they say, well, why don't these government cases actually give money to people, right? Like, that seems like it should be pretty easy. And I say, see, the left has turned consumer protection into a money racket, right? They've turned it into a political money game. And so one of the things that you've seen more and more in recent years is big left-wing law firms get signed up on a contract by a state. They sue some big megadeth company, probably a company that deserves it. And then when they settle the case, the law firm gets a huge check. The government bureaucrat puts it into another check into the government budget, and then consumers get very little. And a lot of people asked me, well, why? Like, why do the lawyers care so much about? Why do the government bureaucrats care so much about these law firms? And so we went and did some digging, and what we've shown is year in and year out, we picked 8 examples that are really big deals. Some of them you might have heard of. Drive down the highway, we see a Morgan billboard right there, one of the Shady Eight. And what we've showed is that year in, year out, these law firms give 99% of their donations at a federal level to Democrats and the allies of Democrats. It's not even close, right? Some of the firms give $0 to any Republican at the federal level. And so we highlight how just last year, these firms, they're only 8 firms, right? They're about less than 2,000 lawyers, and they gave over $4 million to Democrats, and they gave over $1 million to the Harris-Walz campaign for president. So what we're really trying to do is raise awareness that the reason you're not getting a check and the reason that consumers don't get anything out of these cases is because the left has managed to turn them into a big political money machine.
Just funneling that money to different Democratic organizations. In fact, 100.
Oh, yeah.
The stunning part was they didn't even hedge their bets. 5 firms gave 100% of their donations to the Democrats. Didn't even hedge a bet.
No, I mean, you only got 5 firms gave 100. The firm that was the most hedged, right? I think they gave 97% to Democrats, right? It's like, the one thing I always remind people is there's always a secretary somewhere. There's always somebody who gave $100 to President Trump, right?
Right.
It is the firms aren't uniform. So if you get to 100%, they managed to avoid even the accidental person who went to WinRed and gave some money, right?
Right.
They're not hedging their bets at all. They're not even trying to be subtle, right? That's how comfortable they got with this money machine, is that they're not trying to hedge their bets. They're not even trying to be clever. They're giving massive checks, and they are giving those checks to just one side. And then, surprise, surprise, when you hear about a consumer protection case, your first thought isn't, "Oh, great, I'm gonna get some money out of that." You know that it's going to go to one of these law firms or one of their buddies, or it's going to go into the government coffers. And at that point, consumer protection is just not serving consumers anymore. It's doing something else, right? Because if you're not getting a check and it's just bureaucrats and left-wing lawyers who funnel millions of dollars into politics, that sure sounds like a hijacked system.
So 5 firms, 100% of their donations to Democrats. So they didn't hedge their bets. Of the 8 firms they investigated, it wasn't 97%. It was 99% of their donate. Maybe one gave 97%, but
one gave yeah.
But it averaged out to 99% of their donations went to Kamala Harris, the DNC, and people like Sherrod Brown, Bob Casey, John Tester. Those are the people that got the money. So it's just. It's so that they go out. This is what's going on, folks. These trial lawyers do this. They take on a company. Sometimes, like you said, maybe they deserve it. Sometimes they don't. It's right. Just not, sometimes just nonsense, but they settle because it's easier to settle. They get everybody to join a class action lawsuit. They get millions of dollars, which they pocket a majority of it for themselves, but they do give a bunch to the Democrats, and you get $2.42. That's whatever. I'm just being facetious. But
yeah, that's right. No, that's right. It's not that far off.
No, I know.
And one of the things that we so this is year in, year out, right? Like, we do this report every year, and we've never seen a year where it's less than 99%. And over the time that we've looked, which is just a few elections, it's almost $25 million. All of which, 99% of which is going to Democrats. And then, the other thing that we have really spent a lot of time highlighting that you'll appreciate is these law firms give 99% of their money to Democrats, and a bunch of their cases are exactly what you're describing. The company doesn't deserve it or whatever it is. But the other thing we've seen is more and more and more, these law firms or their buddies are bringing lawsuits to try to take things away from you the Democrats couldn't get in Congress, right? So they're suing over plastic bottles and trying to get Coke and Pepsi to stop using plastic bottles. They're suing energy companies. They're suing your utility, trying to get them to stop using natural gas in your utility rates and instead use windmills and stuff, right? They are just trying to get the left's agenda in the courtroom and also take millions from those cases so they can also give more money, right? That's the real thing that you're seeing here, is that they've figured out that's the next step, right? Is they're already milking the system for money, and now they're figuring out that they can actually try to change your life through the courtroom.
They've actually been doing this for years, so they were actually, and we were actually, the first victims of lawfare. It's just a different version of lawfare. What they cannot legislate, they regulate, and what they can't regulate, they litigate, and that's what they do until so they because they want their way. Damn it! How dare Trump win, and how dare you think you have a say in your government? So we're going to do what we do, and again, if we can't get it through the legislature, if we can't get it through regulation, we'll litigate and we'll tie you up in courts till you cry uncle. And they've done it with Trump. They've done it with us. They've done it on these cases. And it's interesting you would have picked Josh Shapiro because he was our state attorney general. He did a lot of grandstanding, announced some big cases, which I don't think ever came to fruition. I don't think he ever followed them through to their end. But he made some big announcements. So sometimes the law firms are paying him and they're funneling money to Democrats. But sometimes these state attorney generals who are Democrats are just doing it to grandstand because guess what? Josh Shapiro has higher aspirations. So he's just doing what he's doing for his own end, not for consumers. It's all bullcrap.